panelists to this point, and I've got a handful of questions here that I will read as best I can. I'm not a great reader, so and these weren't in the future when you guys have questions. If you want them directed specifically to one panel member, could you just say, just type on there for whomever the panel member is, and that might help us out a little bit. But I have some general questions here, and you guys can kind of divide it up and see who wants to answer, I guess. So first question, compare vaccinating at branding, then boostering at weaning to give 2 rounds of vaccine a few weeks apart. I can read it again if need be. Compare vaccinating at branding, then boostering at weaning to give 2 rounds of vaccine a few weeks apart.
I'll go. You want me to go ahead and tackle that?
Yep.
Okay. That's certainly, it's a great idea to vaccinate at branding. And if you use modified live, my understanding is that you actually can invoke both a humoral, meaning antibody response, as well as a cellular response. And even in the face of maternal antibody, even if they've had colostrum, that's all well and fine. But there's nothing like boostering when you, in that interval, 2 to 3 weeks later. So yeah, that sounds like 3 vaccinations, but that would be way better to be able to vaccinate them at branding 3 weeks before weaning, and then again closer to weaning. One other comment while I've got the mic. I've dealt with a number of trick herds. I'm sure that Jeff and JJ have also seen the same thing. It's not that scary a disease, except when it hits you in the face the very first time. But you can pretty much, usually you can get out of it in a year if you put clean bulls on pairs and you have good fences. So it's a neighbor disease. People don't develop trick from just, coming from outer space. It came through a fence. If you haven't had it before, it came with a bull or cow in or a bull or cow out. The other thing that I have experienced, which is a little bit scary in a positive trick herd, is occasionally I pride myself. I'm the best trick sample taker on the face of the earth. Oh yeah, well, I should be through in one go around, right? No, in a 50 bull battery, I picked up 2 more about 3 weeks later, 1 more 3 weeks later. And in my research, what I found was it's possible for the bug numbers to kind of go up and down. And it has to do probably with the immunity of the bull. And if the immunity of the bull is able to beat down the numbers, then you may not be able to pick it up. So especially with the reduced cost of this pooling possibility, that's going to make a big difference. And so don't be afraid of going through and getting a negative test. I actually tested that herd 4 times before we were clean, and we were clean. The conception went up to where it was supposed to be, and they were negative from then on. But I did pick up a couple following. So either you guys got any comments about that? I'll go ahead and mute.
Go ahead, Jeff. Randy, I completely agree with you. It's not that big a deal to just get everything tested. We can pool them now, which is going to be a good benefit. And it only takes you about a year to clean it up. And the only guys that really have a hard time are the ones that only have a 30% calf crop that year. So I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, Randy and Jeffrey, I'll weigh into it. And you're right, guys, you clean it up. But the thing that Randy hit on, you put bulls in with pairs. Guys, if you're not going to manage the cows, you can test those bulls, bulls, put clean bulls, and you're going to have a problem again. So it's a full management deal. When you have the disease, you need to bite the bullet, and you got to figure that out. Am I going to go ahead and sell open cows, or am I going to put one-time bulls on and completely run a separate herd? and run that chance on those open cows. So second chance and third chance cows are the ones that come back and bite you in the butt on that. And the only thing, Randy, that I have found, the time between testing these bulls is completely dependent upon how quickly they can rebuild those corrals. So I agree with you 100%. It just depends on how quick we can get those boards and nails back up. One thing I want to touch on the vaccine at branding, I'm a big advocate of using that vaccine at branding, and part of that is BRSV that we see in the summertime. Out here on these dry ranges, dust, like Randy, anything I can do to give that calf a fighting chance in July and August that he's not going to get sick or she's not going to get sick on that cow, I'm going to do. And I think using those vaccines at branding are probably one of the biggest things we can do. So I'm a big advocate of that too. Let's use it at branding and then hit them a couple times, depending on your situation, depending on how you're set up in your operation, right ahead of weaning, at weaning, immediately after, whatever that is, but work with your vet to get that done.
Thank you, JJ. And this one is directed strictly to you, JJ. Has to do with trick. Will cows clean out trick on their own?
Yeah. So the technical answer is yes, Barry, they will. You need them to run a couple of estrus cycles through. You can culture trick out of a cow as well, but the easiest thing to do is have that longer period of time when they're without bulls. If you are going to not preg, and if you are going to run open cows, make sure those bulls are out, ideally for 6 months, if you're going to run one of them longer operations like that. But give her at least 3 cycles for an opportunity to clean out.
Cool, thank you. This one, you guys can figure out who you want to answer this.
Can I
Go ahead.
make a comment on that? I have diagnosed trick in a couple of herds at preg checking time by finding pyometras. And so one of the things to keep in mind is, yeah, a lot of cows will clean up. Some of them won't. Some of them will pack a pyometra, maybe even for a year. So she's going to just have that bug. And that's usually where you get into trouble if you don't just put clean bulls on pairs, is you can reinfect a bull by getting an infected cow. That's why JJ was mentioning, if you want to try and keep a separate herd with a throwaway bull, a one-time bull, then you might be able to do that. But again, fences and rebuilding corrals, like JJ said, absolutely true. Okay, I'm done.
Cool, thank you. All right, next question. Any suggestions on more natural ways to control parasites? For instance, with supplements or other livestock? Playing stump the band.
Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and tackle that. There's a lot of work going on in New Zealand right now, and what they're trying to do is select genetically for animals that are more resistant. I think it's pretty new, and with the new studies in genetics and genomics and resistance and things like that, we'll probably head that direction, but I am not aware of anything other than to try and limit the exposure, because the bugs are the bugs. And if they're going to take residence in the cow critter, by golly, they're going to be living there. And as they get older, they get more resistance, but the calves are just culture plates.
Okay.
Yep. Barry, I think one thing that he wants to keep in mind is let's go into clean pastures with the cleanest cows and the cleanest animals possible. That's one thing where I probably see the biggest challenge. They'll go ahead and use a dewormer, injectable poron, whatever the case might be, a drench, but they don't get them all, or else they put some dirty cattle in there right behind them or right ahead of those ones they just treated. And if your pasture's dirty, they're picking it up that way. So that's one of the biggest things you can do aside from a natural.
Rotate your pastures that you're turning out in. Never hurts. Jeffrey, do you have something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those two guys are spot on. You're not really going to find a natural remedy to kill ticks and worms and that stuff. Maybe there's a little ground you can gain with with trying some salt, maybe with a little garlic in it. There's some research coming out on that too, but we're going to look at that down the road. But those guys are right. Run your cows into clean pastures, manage them well, keep the parasite load down as much as you can, and raise good cattle, and keep the immune system, keep your cows in good body condition so that they can naturally fight off a little bit of that parasite on their own. Run down cows and thin cows seem like they have a lot more issue with, to me. You guys can jump in if you have anything else.
He's good. Everybody's good. Just a follow up to that, I've got another question here. Does anybody know the name of the outfit in Utah that's putting garlic in mineral?
The outfit's called Redmond Salt. Redmond Salt, and the Huck Salt here in Fallon's peddling that for them a little bit. So, and I have no financial obligation to either party, so I'm not making anything for selling it. So I just know a few guys that used it this fall, and man, their cattle looked good. And the flies weren't bothering them as bad as the other guys. So take it for what it's worth. Redmond Salt.
Hey, Jeff, does that cut down on the amount of seasoning you got to use when you go to the Star? Then you don't need the garlic on top, or what?
I'm sure you wouldn't want to drink the milk out of her.
I was just thinking that same thing.
Now it's formulated. I mean, too much garlic pushes you. I mean, there's a toxicity there. So those should be formulated, and they sell it to cattle producers all over. So it's just something to look into if you think it might help.
Cool. Thank you. Here's one. Can you define myocarditis? Define myocarditis.
Inflammation of the heart muscle.
We have a consensus on that one. Okay.
Absolutely.
Next question. How can a heifer get an immunity from foothills abortion? How can a heifer develop an immunity to foothills abortion?
You want me to?
Jump in,
I
Randy.
think we're all gonna do the same thing. Go ahead, Randy.
Okay. Well, a heifer can gain immunity by being bit by a tick that's packing the bug. And the trouble is that it appears as though the immunity doesn't really develop in heifers unless they're sexually mature. And it doesn't work that way for all of them, because people that are in endemic areas, when they have abortions, they usually run about maybe 80% okay and maybe 20% abortions. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. If you bring a bunch of cattle, doesn't matter whether they're old or young, from the Central Valley of California and put them on a pasture where they're going to get exposed, you can get 80 or 90% abortions. The vaccine is not technically called a vaccine. Technically, there's another name for it, because what they've done is they've been able to grow the bug in skid mice. And the skid mouse is, I think it stands for severely compromised immunodeficient mouse. Eventually, they bred a bunch of mice that have no immune system, and they're able to grow the bug that causes the abortion. They'll get that out of maybe the spleen of an aborted calf or something like that, put it into these skid mice, and that's what they're doing, is they're growing the bug in the mice, and then they're taking the virulent, nasty, dirty bugger bug, that is a medical term, by the way, and putting that, they're titrating it out so they get at least, I think it's like, it only takes about 1,200 or something like that bugs. And then they put that into heifers. The vaccine has to go in 60 days before you turn the bulls in. If you push that, then and we're in that window right now, but if you push that, then you can get abortions. I know they did some research and they gave it 30 days and they lost a few calves. But in the herds that I've worked with, it's running right about 98 or 99% effective if you vaccinate heifers 60 days or more before. And the bug is such a slow grower, it takes that long for it to invoke immunity. So you've got those two ways. You can try to expose them, and they don't all expose at the same rate. And that probably has to do with only 10% of the ticks are infected. And if they don't happen to be where they get infected, then those are the ones probably in an endemic area that do drop a calf. Whereas vaccine, then you're able to actually. Anybody else?
A few things to go along with you, Randy, is like he said, it's only a heifer vaccine. You give it to a herd of cows, you're going to abort a bunch. So we're trying to get the immunity in, most commonly given it at Bang's vaccine time or somewhere around that time. And hopefully we can gain some. The herds we vaccinated with, we haven't bred them yet. So we're pretty new into the game with this. It's not a cheap endeavor for the producer to give the vaccine either, but it can be a good option if you're going to run in that country. If your calves weren't born there and bitten by the tick and gain some natural immunity, it might be a good option.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I have heard by the time you culture and get the results back, the pink eye strain can change. Is this true? Want to hear it again?
I'll take a stab at it, Barry.
Okay.
There are a lot of different strains that can cause pink eye, and that's why a lot of times we see a poor result from the commercial vaccines, because we're not actually vaccinating the cattle for what's there. And things can shift a little bit. I would imagine if we swabbed a handful of calves at your place, sent it to the lab, had it cultured, in that 4 or 5 day window, I think we'd probably know what we're dealing with. Now, if it's a month down the road or a year down the road, I think it could have changed by then. But in the acute stage, if they're tearing up and starting pink eye and we swab those, I would dang sure bet that in 4 or 5 days when we had the result, we'd know what we were dealing with.
Good. Great. All right, next question. Could someone touch on you, and this may be our last question. Could someone touch on using intranasal vaccine and injectable used at the same time? Will that combination work to boost without processing calves 2 times?
I'll take it first, Barry, and I'm sure, Randy and Jeffrey might want to weigh in. So intranasal vaccine, I like it if I'm going to have a lot of exposure right now. It tends to give you a lot more local immune response immediately, if you will, where you're not waiting, especially if it's the first time you're putting that vaccine in those calves, the injectable vaccine. I do not recommend to my clients that they use intranasal and injectable and skip the booster. We just aren't seeing that long range humoral response as we get down the road. So I wouldn't recommend it. I do like the intranasal again, if I'm going to put them into a dusty area, for example, or if I know I'm going to stress the heck out of them in the next few days, I'll use intranasal and injectable.
I'll go ahead and put in my 2 cents. I agree completely. It's not good enough for a oncer, but I do use an intranasal, especially in the face of an outbreak. If I want to try and shut things down, you can get something called interferon on the nasal mucous membranes within 24 hours. And that can really help stop a nasty outbreak. But there's the longevity of the immune response is pretty minimal for the intranasal versus the injectable. But I'm not afraid of using both at the same time either. That's, they're not going to counteract. It's just for duration of immunity, you need the injectable.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. Where I've seen the best use of the intranasal is just what you two talked about, in the face of an outbreak or right before you're going into a high stress situation like trucking calves, that sort of thing. If the only time you can get a vaccine in them is right when they're going on the truck, boy, I'd put an intranasal. I'd like both, but Intranasal is going to help you there in the short run. But the duration of immunity for the injectable with the booster is far greater than the duration of immunity with an intranasal. So if you can apply that to your operation, that sure benefit you.
I got to unmute myself. The last question that I have here is, are most bugs in the dirt?
What kind of bugs? That's a tricky. Yes, but not bacteria and viruses.
June bugs.
So if we're talking respiratory bugs and infectious bugs, no, Barry. While some bacteria and can live in the soil for quite a while, and even some viruses can. Most of what you see is it's in the herd, and it's running through them, and they get a little bit immune compromised, and bang. Just like I talked to you guys about Histophilus, it's running through cows. But when it finally gets enough, and that immune system can't fight it back, and you start to get a break with it. But there's the majority of them do not live in the soil. Now, parasites is obviously a different story.
Right. I was just about to mention that most of the parasites have some portion of their life cycle that they're actually in the soil, or they're on the grass, or somewhere that you could call ground level anyway. Randy, I thought you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to put in 2 more cents. And that's one of the things I used to hear a lot. I don't hear it so much anymore, is my calves are scouring because it's in the ground. And boy, I take issue with that. That's in cows. Your bugs are in your cows, and it doesn't matter whether it's respiratory or whether it's digestive. They're in your cows, and that's what packs it around. I worked in New Zealand for about 3 years, and I think that whoever came up with the sand hill calving system must have gone to New Zealand and learned how to rename it, because I worked with a guy down there. He had 400 ewes and 4 pastures, and he would lamb out 100 ewes, and then he would move to 300 into the next pasture and lamb out 100, and then move the 200 left into another pasture, and then he would take the 100 left and put them in the last pasture. And so he was always staying ahead of the contamination. When I got here to Nevada, only a couple of years ago, about 40 or a little more, not like JJ, what I noticed was people had a calving pasture. Well, by the time they were through, they would run anything that got sick through the corrals. So anything that came through the corrals would get sick. And what I've told people is, all the vets and the antibiotics in the world aren't near as good as Mother Nature if you give her a chance. It doesn't pay to stay and fight the problem. You don't need to stay. Run away if you can. Find some sandy ground and calve out there. But people that have a nice, small, easily accessible calving pasture and can't understand why they have scours towards the end of calving, well, it's in your cows. It gets into the calves because they're going to go, and they like to lay on whatever hay's left when you're through feeding, and then it gets on the back of the cow, gets into the calf, and then Katie bar the door. Yeehaw, things are going to happen.
Okay. Dr. Euler, do you have any final remarks before we close out this session?
Well, if I throw 2 more cents in, I'm going to be broke. So I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, we've made our way through all the questions. I appreciate you guys. This thing has really gone smooth. This session has. And so if you would like to stick around, please do so. If you got to go doctor some cattle or somebody's dog, we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll move on to our next presenter. I'd like to have a round of applause, but it's kind of doesn't work very well under this scenario. So you're getting applause here in the control room. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, everybody.
One more
Yep. Thank you.
Pip, if I could. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. It was good to see who we're dealing with, and appreciate her comments very much. It's nice to have somebody on board that really working at it, taking it seriously, and I've dealt with her a number of times, and it's been great. Appreciate her. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.